Chapter 5, Ancient China. Ancient China was the location of one of the world's first civilizations. We're going to get to know this region by completing a few map activities. First, I'd like you to study this map. From looking at this map, do you think it was easy or hard for the people of China to make contact with people of other civilizations? Pause the video for a few seconds, a minute if you need to. Think about this and be able to explain your answer. Okay, now, you know that ancient civilizations in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and India started in river valleys. Pick a place on the map here from ancient China where you think Chinese civilization may have started, and explain your choice. Keep in mind there are mountains, deserts, rivers, seas, and plateaus all on this map. Think about where that civilization of ancient China would have began and be able to explain your answer. Pause the video while you think, and then return and we'll begin section 1. Chapter 5, Section 1, The Geography of China's River Valleys. Is the area where you live subject to natural dangers such as earthquakes, floods, or severe storms? If so, what steps has your community taken to protect the people from such natural disasters? As we read this section, there's a few questions we're going to explore. The first is, how did geography help shape China's view of the world? And then, how was the early Chinese family household organized? Key terms that will be defined for you through the Google Classroom to pay attention for through the section are Lesh, Dike, Extended Family. Key places are the North China Plain, the Huanghe, and the Shangjing River. Please make sure to have your notes, which are your guided reading questions that you will be turning in for homework, available as you watch this video. Suggestions would be to pause the video when you come to an answer, fill it in, and then resume the video until you come to the next answer. What words would you use to describe the dragon, such as this one? You may think of these imaginary beasts as being fierce and scary. People of some cultures would agree with you. But to the Chinese people, the dragon is a respected spirit, not a terrible monster. In China, dragons are friendly beasts that bring good luck. They are also connected with the rain that makes the fields fertile. The Chinese also use this respected spirit to show the importance of their rivers. They traditionally describe their rivers as dragons. The dragon's limbs are the smaller streams. They follow into the dragon's body or main river. The dragon's mouth is the delta, where the river flows into the sea. The geographic setting of ancient China. Rivers were important to the development of civilization in China. Other landforms and climate played a role, too. Contrasting climate and landforms. Locate the North China Plain on the map on this screen. The climate and vegetation of this northern region of China are very different from those in the south. Monsoons from the South China Sea bring rains to the southern half of China. This area is warm and wet. The monsoon rains don't reach the cooler northern part of China and the North China Plain. This area doesn't get much rain at other times either. As a result, the climate is very dry. To survive this dry land, people have always depended on rivers. The Middle Kingdom. Geographic barriers such as mountains and seas cut China off from other lands. As a result, the Chinese knew only of the nomadic peoples to the north and west of them. They had no knowledge of the powerful civilizations half a world away, Egypt, India, Greece, and Rome. In fact, the Chinese did not call their land China. They were so sure they lived at the center of the world that they called themselves the Middle Kingdom. Rivers, the birthplace of civilization. Several of the world's earliest civilizations in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and India grew up near major rivers. In China, the same forces were at work. Identify on the map the Huanghe and the Shangjang, sometimes called the Yangtze River. Here's the Zhangjiang, or the Yangtze, and the Huanghe would be a bit difficult to identify on this map because it's also known as the Yellow River. So this is also the Huanghe, and this is the Zhang. Yang. Civilization began in China along the Huanghe and later spread to the wetter south along the Shanjiang River, which is the longest river in China. Like rivers in other parts of the world, China's rivers overflowed their banks each spring. They brought fresh, fertile topsoil to the land. Because of this, China's first farming villages developed along its rivers. The Huanghe, or the Yellow River, begins in the highlands of Tibet. From there it flows for more than 3,000 miles until it empties into the Yellow Sea. It is the second largest river in China. The Huanghe is the muddiest river in the world. In fact, it's called the Yellow River because of the lech, or the yellow-brown soil that its waters carry along. When the Huanghe floods, it deposits lech on the surrounding plain. After thousands of years and countless floods, the Huanghe has carpeted the North China plain with a thick layer of soil. This makes the land perfect for growing crops, especially a grain called millet. For thousands of years, millet was an important part of the Chinese diet because it grew so well on the northern plain. China's sorrow. The Chinese people also call the Huanghe China's sorrow. The river was unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. It brought life to the land, but frequently it also took life away. Destructive floods could come without warning, sometimes as often as every 2 years. Sometimes a flood drowned thousands of people. At times, the river flooded with such force that the water cut an entirely new path over the land. The course of the river could change by hundreds of miles. To help control the flooding, early Chinese people built dikes along the banks of the Huanghe. A dike is a protective wall that holds back the waters. But these dikes only worked for a while. As the river water flowed along, some of the lech settled at the bottom. This raised the level of the river. Eventually, the river rose high enough to burst through the dikes, causing even more deadly floods. Despite such dangers, the early Chinese people continued to settle along the banks of the Huanghe. Sowing the seeds of civilization. Historians do not know exactly when the first farming settlements developed in the Huanghe Valley. Some think it was as early as 5000 BC. Before that, the people of the North China Plain were probably nomads who moved from place to place to hunt and gather food. The Shang dynasty was the first known civilization in China. It arose sometime after 1700 BC. The Shang people built China's first cities. Among their many accomplishments is some of the finest bronze work of ancient China. The Shang people also produced the first Chinese writing. Like Mesopotamia's cuneiform and our own alphabet, the Chinese system of writing could be used for different languages. This was helpful for communications because China had many regional languages. The bonds of family. The family was the center of the early Chinese society. It was far more important than the individual or the nation. For each person, the family was the chief source of well-being. A person's first responsibility was always to the family. Traditional families. A household in ancient China might contain as many as 5 generations living together. This meant that small children lived with their great-great-grandparents as well as their parents, uncles, and aunts, cousins, brothers, and sisters, and so on. These closely related people are called an extended family. In rich families, the members might live together in one big home. But most of China's people were poor. In farming villages, members of the extended family might live in separate one-room cottages. The cottages were within easy walking distance from one another. The status of each person in a Chinese extended family depended on age and gender. The center of authority was usually the oldest man. He had the most privileges and power in the family. He decided who his children and grandchildren would marry. When children were disrespectful, he punished them strictly. After the oldest male died, by tradition, all his lands were divided among his sons. Each son then started his own household. Women's lives were usually governed by men. According to tradition, they obeyed their fathers in youth, their husbands in middle age, and their sons in old age. When a woman married, she left her household and became part of her new husband's family. Family names. The Chinese were the first people known to use 2 names. One name was for the family, which was passed down from father to son. The other was for the individual. Of course, people in the United States also use 2 names. In Chinese society, however, the family name comes first. If this system were used in American society, you would know the first president of the United States as Washington George, not George Washington. Think of other famous people in American history. What would their names be in the Chinese naming style? The fact that the family name comes first in China shows how important the family is. This tradition in Chinese society dates back to the very earliest times. Centuries later, a great philosopher, Confucius, added a new meaning to the importance of one's family. This is the end of section 1. At this time, you should be able to answer a few questions. Number 1. How did the Huang He affect ancient Chinese civilization? 2. How was the early Chinese family household organized? And 3. What do you think ancient China might have in common with other great ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and India? Be able to answer those questions. Also, make sure that you have completed your Google Doc through the Google Classroom to submit and turn in for homework. And once you have completed that, we'll see you tomorrow. Be excellent to one another.